Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. Scale Up Milwaukee has been a powerful platform for companies to grow within the region. Executive Director Elmer Moore joins us today to talk about this initiative and how they plan to meet their goal of adding $1 billion in revenue to the community by 2020. Welcome to Brandstorm, Elmer.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
You have a really diverse career in business development and entrepreneurship. Can you give us a little bit of your background?
Presuming that we don't have the rest of the afternoon to talk about the different Elmers that I've been, the short version is I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, which is actually a city very similar to Milwaukee. I also lived in Maine for 9 years, which is a state very similar to Wisconsin. So when I moved here 5 years ago, there was something quite familiar to these places.
Sure.
The biggest difference was there's nothing like Maine near Baltimore, and there's nothing like Milwaukee near Maine. But I got here because I was hired to be director of business development for a men's shoe company called Allen Edmonds.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yeah, you've
Very
heard of them, right? And that was my introduction to the Midwest. That was my introduction to Wisconsin. And truth be told, I had no idea what I was getting into when I got here. But it really has unfolded into an opportunity to use all of the vast experiences I've lived to date. So I was Associate Dean of Admissions for a small liberal arts college. I've run retail stores. I've worked in video post-production and audio recording. So I've done a lot of different things, and I get to use all of them now and here.
Well, good for us. Good for our city, right?
Yes. So I never get sick and tired of talking about fostering new businesses and entrepreneurship and startups. We've had several podcasts in the past on this topic. So tell us a little bit more about Scale Up Milwaukee. What's your mission, your vision for that organization?
Scale Up is a little bit amazing, right? So Scale Up is about promoting entrepreneurial growth in order to catalyze inclusive economic development. What we understand is that when businesses are growing, they cast off really wonderful metrics, right? So a growing business will hire people. They might buy a building or turn a space into a building that actually invigorates that community. Growth is both contagious and infectious, and it's inspiring. And so Scale Up is really about making growth a common ambition for the region. We're about making this place the growth capital of the world. We've got a long history in Milwaukee and southeastern Wisconsin, and in fact, Wisconsin in general, of making things and really being at the forefront of the nation's economy. And Scale Up is about celebrating that, and it's about returning us to our rightful place.
You've been involved in a lot of things. So how did Scale Up Milwaukee come about? How did you get involved in that?
So when I arrived in 2013, again, working with Allen Edmonds, we knew that there was a path towards transitioning the ownership of that company. And so we did, in fact, sell the company from one private equity owner to another. So I decided to sort of take my leave after that, mission accomplished. And in the year that I had been here, I made a few interesting connections that I had no idea would ultimately affect my professional trajectory the way it has. But it was friends, it was colleagues that said, hey, there's this thing going on. There's this pilot program called Scale Up Milwaukee. It might be interesting for you. And it was a combination of my time in nonprofits, working in education, working on fostering communities, and my time working in business came together through economic development in the form of Scale Up Milwaukee. So I met some folks, a guy named Dan Eisenberg, who actually created the Scale Up model and has been proliferating that model around the world. I met folks from the Greater Milwaukee Committee, which is the organization that is the sort of parent organization for Scale Up, and it felt like a great fit. It allowed me to spend my days with folks that own businesses and the folks that own the resources to help those businesses grow, making connections, being an obnoxious cheerleader for growth, right? That's what I think of myself as being. I'm a cheerleader.
That's good.
Yeah.
In your website, you mentioned, and you just mentioned now, Daniel Eisenberg. Tell us a little bit more about what his model for fostering entrepreneurship is.
So Dan is a provocateur, and he's absolutely an academic. So I'll describe the model. I'll give you the high version, which is the academics version, then I'll give you the low version. The academic model is comprised of 6 categories of stakeholders. We call them domains, and those domains might be the large companies in a region. They might be the financial institutions, the hiring entities, or the connection to talent, the universities that are preparing them, and so on. And Dan's model was really about the interaction between these categories of stakeholders, generating growth within one another. So what he really understands is that you can't grow in a vacuum. Obviously, a business can't grow without customers. It can't grow without financing. It can't grow without talent. And so he created a process-driven approach to interacting with those stakeholders as individuals in order to get them to aspire to greater growth and recognize their role in affecting growth in others. So I'll give you an example. How do we get lawyers and bankers, accountants and consultants to think of themselves as chiefly responsible for the growth of their clients? In the meanwhile, how do we go to the clients and say, you are responsible for your own growth? It's necessary for you to go find the accountants, lawyers, bankers, and so on, who are willing to be agents for your growth. And wouldn't you know it, when you challenge everyone to do that, they respond by growing. One of my favorite things that we do, for instance, is the companies that go through our accelerator program, we change their language. So instead of introducing themselves as, hey, we're small business owners, we say, nope, you're growing business owners. And it's that kind of cultural shift, sort of mental shift, and then shift in their practices that results in growth. So Dan recognized that growth was achievable once you made it a cultural concern. We stopped being Midwestern modest. We stopped being nice and friendly about it. We say, we're a place that grows companies. And then you follow that with resources and relationships.
You mentioned Accelerator. What are some of the programs that you do offer for people in Scale Up Milwaukee? What can entrepreneurs enroll in?
So the thing that we're most known for is an accelerator program for businesses with roughly $1 million in revenue to roughly, let's say, $14 million in revenue. So we've done 4 cohorts as the Scalerator. And I'm so excited. We've actually rebranded that into the Scale Up Milwaukee Growth Accelerator. That's how we tick off a lot of our impact numbers, because the relationship with those companies allows us to record their revenue and their headcounts and so on. So that's an incredible opportunity for folks that want to grow. The other things we do, we have a membership program. The membership is great for companies that might not be large enough, or in fact are too large to go through our accelerator program. For the ecosystem actors, the financial institutions, the universities, the consultants, and so on, to connect themselves to growing companies. Membership meetings are these high-energy celebrations of growth. In fact, our annual meeting is called the Celebration of Growth. What we care about is growth. What we care about is encouraging growth in others. So we have interview sessions called Meet the Masters, where we stage a 1-hour interview with someone who's grown a large company. So imagine we've got 35 people in a room, and I'm interviewing Craig Culver, right? The founder of Culver's Restaurants.
Right.
And the purpose is not just to have this incredibly successful entrepreneur say, well, I did it, it was hard. We want him to tell the story of how he grew. The founding story is wildly important. But in that moment, we're focusing on how you went from, okay, this thing is working, to I've now got 600 restaurants. What was that journey like? And we do that to make it achievable, to make it tangible to those in the audience, but also to make it a practical learning experience. Too often we get excited about the more abstract parts of entrepreneurship. This is about being practical. What did you say to that second customer?
Right.
Not just the first, right? The first was your friend. They knew you.
Sure.
What did you say to the second customer? And so on.
Yeah, I love the name Scale in your branding too, because so many startups or growing businesses or small businesses, you get from A to B, but how do you get to G, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, you go from 3 employees, which are 2 of your buddies, and you start the company, to maybe you have growth to 30, but how do you get to 3,000?
Amen. You know? So I love to believe that just by getting people to say our name, we're doing the work.
Right.
You know, just it becomes a call to action. It becomes a question. It becomes, you know, an encouraging statement to everyone around you. Hey, where are you going? Well, we're going to a Scale Up Milwaukee event.
Yeah.
It's collective.
Again, that's Scale Up Milwaukee event.
Yeah, exactly. Scale Up Milwaukee. And, you know, one of the things that people challenge us on is, why are we Scale Up Milwaukee? Why are we not Scale Up Wisconsin or so on? We're Scale Up Milwaukee because that's how we started. But our mission, our raison d'etre if I can throw in a fancy word.
It's very fancy.
Yeah, it's really
reason to
The
be,
definition
for
of
those who
that
don't
word
know.
will be in our show notes.
yeah,
Jim, write that down.
We're
Reason
just
to be.
about scaling up the region.
So what is the ideal type of entrepreneur or business that you're trying to attract?
Someone who is ambitious. And that really is the whole answer. We have programs that have some criteria, but what we care first about is someone who is ambitious and excited to let their ambition be contagious. Our program, we focus on what we consider scalable business models. So someone whose use of resources will become more efficient as they gain size. But when we have a members meeting, when we have a guide to growth, when we have a Meet the Masters event, when we have our roundtables, when we have anything, what we're excited about is folks that want to grow. We are industry agnostic. We are segment agnostic. We care about growth. That's what we care about. Good growth, profitable growth.
Can you share a case study of someone who's really benefited?
The hard thing about this question is less finding one, but only finding one.
Oh,
So there's
Good place
companies
to
that
be.
I love to talk about. There's Central Standard Craft Distillery. When we met them, it was two guys, Evan and Pat, and they're insane. You're going to start a distillery? What do you guys know about making liquor? And what's fun about it is I met Pat multiple times at the small version of their distillery on South 2nd Street. I happen to not drink alcohol. So I would go to Pat's place, and it's lovely. I highly recommend it. It's got a small still inside and a bar where you can taste everything they make, and they do a tour. It's lovely. And I went through this tour probably 4 times. And every time, Pat and I would have a brief exchange, and he would recognize me because I don't drink. And I'd say, Pat, you really got to check out Scale Up Milwaukee. I think you'd be interested, and it's about growth. I want to help you grow. And I would take a glass of whatever he was showing the tour, and I'd smell it. And never taste it because that's not what I do. And eventually Pat took me up. We sort of connected for coffee, and fast forward, he goes through the program. And Pat's he's a former banker. He's a very sophisticated guy. He knows business. But I'll tell you what, he was sitting in that room in his cohort, and he was being challenged to grow by these other businesses like Fixation Bikes. And each month when they would come to a session, there would be a moment where each of them says, hey, last month I signed a contract. Hey, we signed a distribution deal. Hey, we just got an order from fill in the blank Fortune 100, 500 company. Now, not only does Central Standard have that South 2nd Street tasting room, but they've got a really sizable plant on the backside of Marquette University where they can make thousands of gallons of product. They're now shooting for a different moon. So instead of shooting for the moon, they're shooting for Jupiter's moon.
Sure.
And I tell you what, they're getting there. They're hiring people. I don't want to start throwing out numbers for how big their still is, but it's big. And so find an excuse to get there as well. They still have tours. It's exciting. I think of Fixation Bikes. Fixation is a great company. Again, who's insane enough to start a bike company?
I know.
Right.
It seems like that would be
It's crazy.
It's
pretty
been
retro,
done, right.
They've
Right?
done that, yeah.
But they did. And not only did they, but they set up a great storefront on Humboldt in River West next to the Collectiva. So they set up this great shop, and they're selling their wares to everyone. And they had this great little side program they were doing. The side program was because they manufacture their own product, or actually they contract manufacture their product. They started this weird idea. They said, hey, we think some large companies would like to use our bikes for giveaways or employee perks or for contests or what have you. And so they created a corporate bike program. And it was like, that's great if we can do 3, 4, 5 bikes at a time. And while sitting in the accelerator program, they got a little more ambitious. They said, this could be something. And I remember from one session to the next, and the sessions are roughly a month apart, they started taking their corporate bike program seriously. They started pushing it. And they came, I think it was maybe the 4th going into the 5th session. They said, would you believe we grew our corporate bike program 200% since the last time we saw you guys? And just moments like that. And imagine being in a room of those 12 companies in that cohort where a business walks into a room and tells a growth story, and you've got other businesses cheering you on. That's the climate that we're trying to create. There's enough for all of us.
That's awesome.
So is there a membership fee, or do you have to pay to be part of this, or how do you join?
We do have a membership program, and the membership does a lot of things. One, it creates a select community of growth ambitious folks, right? So entrepreneurs and resources. Second, our membership is important so that we can stay afloat.
Sure.
Right? That's our
Sure.
business model. So for companies under 10 million, our membership annually is $1,000. For companies over 10 million, it is $3,000 annually. Membership is about coming into the room. It's about access to our programming, which is things like our roundtables. It's things like our consulting. So we do a thing twice a month. We have office hours. We allow companies to book time with us to manage their growth challenges. So we've made a practice at Scale Up. You don't come to us and say, hey, I need a bank. And we don't introduce you to a bank. You say, hey, listen, we're trying to work through financing. We're having some cash flow concerns. And we say, hey, talk to this banker because we know this banker is a good fit for a growing company that makes X, Y, and Z or sells X, Y, and Z. So that's what we do.
So it's more networking with people versus companies.
Absolutely. We call it, resource connecting.
So you have another program listed called Spark. What's that?
Oh, Spark.
With a C.
From what I hear, I don't have kids. My wife and I are working on it. From what I hear, you're not supposed to have a favorite kid.
No, you're not. We
You're not.
love them all the same.
Okay. Well, then I love all.
I have a favorite.
All my children.
He has one child.
Oh, you have. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
So we launched Spark last year. Spark was an answer to two things. We meet all these great business owners that say, hey, I want to grow, but I'm not big enough for the growth accelerator. What about me? The second prompt we were answering is, hey, we are in Milwaukee. We are a minority-owned business. We are a woman-owned business, and we're just not getting access to some of the resources that the others are. What about me? And so we built Spark. Spark is for businesses with 100,000 to 1 million in revenue, focusing on women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses in Milwaukee. And let me tell you, we had 19 companies go through our pilot version of Spark last fall, and I went into that room every month. It was exceptional. The fun of working with businesses that are doing, let's say, $150,000, $250,000 is oftentimes the owner is still the business. And so when they hire that first, second, or third person, when they buy that building, that is a pivotal
huge,
moment.
right.
Sure.
So I love Spark. Spark was great. We're going to have ongoing success stories coming out of it. It's just finished in December, so we're waiting to hear how those companies do this year. And I think there's going to be some great stories to tell.
You also have a CEO forum. What's that about?
So remember, we are an ecosystem project. For us, it's about all hands on deck. Growth is a community concern. The CEO forum was our way of engaging the large company CEOs. They are as responsible for what's happening in their backyard as the small business. And so we were bringing in publicly traded companies, large privates, and we're putting them in a small room and we're saying, let's focus on growth. And I'll tell you, they really enjoyed it. And we're a little funny about the CEO forum because we don't often talk about who was in the room, but many of the large publics and privates you can imagine were there. And these CEOs would talk about their personal growing concerns. I'm going to give away a little bit of a secret. Everyone has the same growing challenges. The difference is when you do $400, $500 million in revenue, you've got a guy who has a team. Right. When you do $1.5 million in revenue, you're the guy.
I was going to say, yeah,
Right.
You're it.
Right?
Right.
So we would do this quarterly. It's really challenging because these folks are running large companies, and to get them in a room locked away for a couple hours is a terribly difficult thing to schedule. But it was really about capturing a moment to encourage growth in these large companies and really to connect them to the impact of their growth on their backyard, the region in their backyard.
I bet it takes them back to the time when they were starting, and I bet there's some excitement there for them to be able to share their knowledge and get back to their own roots.
You're exactly right, because we would occasionally bring in accelerator companies into that moment. We would also invite the CEOs to bring a second in command. We would actually have a moment where we'd switch chairs. So if you can imagine the CEOs around the table and everyone else is sitting around the perimeter. And then there's a moment where we switch. We have the subordinates sit around the table and the CEOs around. And we're talking about very large companies. And there was this moment of energy transfer. There's, when you launch a new product and you are running a bakery that does $500,000, it's really stressful. Turns out when you're launching a new product and you are running, let's say, a a company that sells small motors or lawn products. Also very stressful. And there was something very familiar, there was something very educational about each of those constituents hearing each other. It was a lot of fun.
How do you expect to reach that $1 billion goal? That's a lofty goal.
That's a lofty goal. We are going to run through the finish line like we didn't know it was there. That's how we get there.
Nice.
Right? So
how are you measuring that? That's what's the metric.
That's the right question. So that $1 billion goal was the result of recognizing what was happening to the companies we were touching as they started to grow exponentially. So in the first year of the accelerator program, we had 12 companies. And they went through the pilot, right? These folks didn't even know what they were signing up for. And they come out and they're growing like gangbusters. And that was 2013. 2014, we do it all over again. We bring in 15 companies. So we've got 2 cohorts, 27 businesses. They're growing crazy. And what we saw is if you can plot the lines, we saw this curve. And we said, wow, if we keep doing this the way it looks like it's going to go, we're going to get to $1 billion pretty quickly, 2020. So we set that as the mark. The third cohort, we've got 15 companies. The fourth cohort, we've got 12 companies. And each year with the cohort size shifting, we still are seeing the curve representing their aggregate revenues increasing. So last year, they did, let's say, about $270 million, these close to 60 companies that are growing. I will say, the companies that were in the first cohort were twice the size in 2016. So from 2013 to 2016, they were twice the size. So that 1 billion mark is not far away.
No.
We also recognize that as we grow our portfolio of programs, we are taking on more companies to help us get there. So just the accelerator companies alone did, roughly 270 last year. That doesn't include our membership. That doesn't include the companies we're touching through our other programs, Spark, and so on. So $1 billion easy. And what we understand also about that $1 billion represents revenue, but there is a lagging indicator for real estate development, for obviously incomes, for community development, and for all these other things that will actually change the region in material ways.
So what sort of events do you have coming up that people might be interested in, particularly entrepreneurs?
We actually keep a really full calendar. So it's really good to sign up for our mailing list, and we'll always be talking about the things that we've got coming next. Immediately, on June 7th, we're actually having the Growth Accelerator launch party. So we will announce the class. We will meet at, guess where? Central Standard Craft Distillery.
There you go.
And we're going to have us a party, and you'll get to meet the new participants. Actually, we'll have alumni there as well, and it's going to be a really good time. So if you're interested in that, it's really a great chance to get a sense of the energy and enthusiasm that we create around growth. We've also got our annual program, the Celebration of Growth, happening on July 25th. At the Celebration of Growth, we have a great speaker that I'm not ready to announce yet, who's really going to get the audience charged up about growth. We're going to talk about all the successes we've had in the last year. We'll hand out Scale Up Awards. Ooh. Yeah, in a bunch of different categories. And we're going to have a lovely morning where we just take a few minutes to discuss and recognize the progress of the last year.
Besides being a company that's, crazy about growth, are there any other requirements of a company to become a member?
Nope.
Wow.
The diversity of the membership is extraordinary. So
And is it all only owners and the entrepreneur itself, or can you be a rising executive in a company that's...
Thank you for asking that question. So
You're welcome.
Our members are the companies. And in fact, we invite a lot of the companies to include someone other than the owner in the room. So when we have an event, so our members meeting, for instance, we have a topical focus. Our last members meeting, we talked about sales. So I'm excited to invite the CEO into that room or the owner in that room, but I also want them to bring whoever's responsible for sales. Our next members meeting will probably focus on talent, hiring, HR, and so on. And so there's more than just the owner should be there as well. We've got members who are nonprofits. We've got members who are very small solopreneurs. We've got large corporate members. Really, that room is about growth and the interaction between all these different entities. I always remind folks that the organization, the business, is the member. And at any particular event, we say, bring bring folks from the company.
I don't know how much people who are listening to this might be knowing where we're at here in the Milwaukee area or southeast Wisconsin. I mean, we're just at the beginning of a huge growth spurt with all of the business that is coming into our community. What role do you think you'll play in that growth that's going to be happening out there?
When I got here 5 years ago, it was really clear to me that Milwaukee was changing. It was in a dynamic moment. And to be frank, because of how much traveling I was doing and how long it took me to really connect with the city, it wasn't clear to me if it was getting better or worse. I am hyper aware it is getting so much better. We are going from a really wonderful city to really reclaiming our position as a world-class destination for growing businesses, innovation, really trend-setting as it relates to economic development, community development, and so on. For the listeners that don't know, we've engaged in the largest economic development initiative in American history, and that was the campaign to secure Foxconn as a plant in southeastern Wisconsin. That deal is huge. It is really beyond comprehension for most of us.
It really is.
It is just absolutely enormous. So it turns out that one of our largest supporters, one of our largest benefactors is the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. And they were the lead agency in brokering that deal. So how are we going to play a role when a multi-billion-dollar plant consumes southeastern Wisconsin? Well, our role is to help the companies sell to them better. There's a value chain, an economic impact so far beyond the supply chain that it's important to remember we've got to get companies ready. So just imagine not only do you build a huge plant, but you drop a couple thousand jobs into a place. Where are those folks going to eat lunch? So you've got folks that are going to start and grow their restaurants. Okay, so now we've got restaurants feeding more people than they've ever fed. Well, they're going to buy more bread for those sandwiches. Okay, there's a bread company that's been supplying that restaurant. We've got to get that bread company ready.
To scale,
absolutely. And the way I think about this is there's the lunch counter, there's the bread company, there's the bag company that's selling to the bread company, there's the mixing company, there's a distributor of mixers.
Yeast factory, right.
Absolutely. The supply chain and the value chain can't be overstated. So our role is really going to be recognizing that not everyone is prepared, that to be truthful, not all the companies that should go after this business know they should go after this business. So we want to get them a little hungrier and connect them to the resources they need to be in that supply chain and that value chain. We consider ourselves the head cheerleaders for all the things that are about to happen. The arena is the same thing. The streetcar is the same thing. These are really great moments that can be captured and leveraged to have enormous community impact in places that don't touch the boundaries of those geographies. So what's happening in Kenosha will impact Fond du Lac. What's happening in downtown Milwaukee will impact the near north side of Milwaukee. And for that matter, what's happening with our arena will impact Racine. There's just an incredible connectivity that we should really leverage.
It's really an exciting time.
It's such a great time. So we should all buy T-shirts that say, "Remember when 2018?"
Right.
Exactly.
You've been a fly on the wall or been directly involved at all these accelerator meetings. What's the biggest barrier to growth that you see that's common among companies?
I wouldn't be myself if I didn't give two answers.
Okay.
The Scale Up Elmer answer is a lack of ambition. I make the fact that I'm not from here part of how I do this work. I'm an obnoxious East Coaster. And part of our inhibitions around growth are this idea that we shouldn't be loud, and we should be loud. So when we go into a room and we say we are going to be the best builder of, the best seller of, the best distributor of, the best whatever in the world, that will change how companies operate. That's the first answer. The second answer, which is a little more technical, has been an interesting education for us. As you can imagine, we meet a lot of businesses and they say, I need money. I need financial capital. I need money. I need investment. I need money. And it turns out that while there's never enough money, one of the other real challenges is accessing human capital. Talent is the most powerful agent for growth that any organization can tap into. And the truth of it is, we forget to become skilled accessors, skilled manipulators of, skilled users of human capital. And so a lot of companies have developed a great production for doing whatever they do, but they need to learn how to find, assess, and utilize human capital.
What's the best way to connect with you if people want to?
Our website is always open and available, and we are scaleupmilwaukee.org or sumke.com. I'm happy to receive emails. My email address is Elmer, ELMER, at sumke.com. That's SU as in scale up, MKE as in our airport code.com.
Well, Elmer, I feel your energy and I like your attitude. Let's be loud, let's be aggressive. But I want us to keep that Midwestern hospitality there as
Amen.
well.
Amen.
Because I think that is what separates us from the East and the West. And I hope I haven't offended any of our listeners who are from the East.
We'll always be Wisconsin.
Let me be offensive. The opportunity we have, let's be loud, and let's invite everybody we talk to be loud with us. That sounds like Midwestern hospitality.
There you go.
That certainly does.
All right.
Certainly does. Elmer, thank you so much. This is an exciting program, and I know it's going to excel over the next few years, and it's going to be a great opportunity for a lot of companies.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And if anyone who is listening to Elmer today or any of our shows, if you like what you hear, please don't forget to share, review, or subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzynski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice for a variety of regional, national, and even global brands on a daily basis. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.